The last transmission, the final hour. The capital world of Zephyria, prime burned beneath a sky filled with metallic death. Ambassador Thane pressed his scaled hand against the reinforced glass of the emergency bunker, watching as the city he had called home for 60 years crumbled under the relentless assault of the massive, biomechanical creatures moved through the streets like living nightmares. Their bodies a twisted fusion of metal and flesh that consumed everything in their path. "Sir, we need to evacuate now," his aide, a young Zephyrian named Kale, urged from behind him. The communications array was already being loaded onto the last transport ship. Around them, the bunker shook as another wave of devourers crashed against the outer defenses. Thane's four eyes never left the destruction outside. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this sector of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. They had been proud, advanced, and strong. Now they were dying, just like the 17 other civilizations that had fallen to the Devourers in the past 5 years. The creatures appeared from the void between galaxies, consumed entire star systems, and moved on. No negotiation, no mercy, no survivors. "The transport is ready, Ambassador," Kale said again, his voice cracking with fear. "The Council is waiting for us at the staging point." Thane finally turned away from the window. His ceremonial robes, once a symbol of diplomatic authority, now felt like a costume in a play that had gone horribly wrong. "Tell me, Kale, do you know the old stories? The ones about the emergency protocols?" Kale looked confused. "Sir, this isn't the time for answer me," Thane said firmly. "Do you know them?" The young aide nodded reluctantly. "Ancient procedures from the early days of the Galactic Senate. Hidden protocols for extinction-level threats. But those are just myths, legends created to make us feel safer." Thane walked to his personal archive, a crystalline storage device that had been in his family for generations. His clawed fingers moved across its surface, accessing files that hadn't been opened in centuries. Not myths, Kale, reality. When the Senate was first formed, they included emergency measures for scenarios exactly like this. The device projected a holographic display showing star maps and encrypted files. Most were corrupted or incomplete, but one file remained intact. It was marked with symbols that neither of them recognized, and coordinates that pointed to a sector of space that had been dark for 3 centuries. "The silent sector," Kale whispered. "But there's nothing there. It's been empty since the humans disappeared." The forgotten species Thane's eyes widened as he read the ancient text. The file was written in Old Galactic, the ceremonial language used only for the most important documents. "Listen to this," he said, translating as he read. "In the event of galactic extinction threat, when all hope is lost and darkness consumes the light, seek the guardians beyond the silent veil. They who withdrew from the galaxy's sight still watch from the shadows. Send the ancient call, and they will answer." "Guardians?" Kale asked. "You mean the humans?" Thane nodded slowly. "The humans vanished 300 years ago. One day they were active members of the Galactic Senate. The next day their ships stopped coming, their ambassadors went home, and their space went silent. Every attempt to contact them failed. Most species assumed they had destroyed themselves or simply given up on galactic civilization." The bunker shook again, more violently this time. Through the communications system, they could hear the desperate voices of the remaining defenders. The Devourers were breaking through the final barriers. "But what if they didn't give up?" Thane continued, his voice growing stronger. "What if they saw something coming that we couldn't see? What if they withdrew to prepare? Kale stared at the coordinates on the display. Sol system. That's where they came from originally. But our scouts have checked that sector dozens of times over the centuries. There's nothing there. No ships, no signals, no signs of life. Then either they're gone, Thane said, or they've become very good at hiding. He began copying the emergency protocols to a portable device. We need to reach the staging point. But first, we're going to send a message to coordinates that may hold our only hope. The journey to Selva staging point was a hollowed-out asteroid in the outer rim of the Zephyrian system. It was supposed to be a temporary command center for the evacuation, but it had become a refugee camp for the survivors of a dying civilization. Ships from across the Empire had gathered there, carrying the last remnants of their people, in the main conference chamber. The surviving members of the Zephyrian Council sat around a circular table. Their faces showed the exhaustion and despair of leaders who had watched their civilization crumble. High Chancellor Vera, the elected leader of the Empire, looked up as Thane entered. "Ambassador," she said, her voice hoarse from days of constant crisis management, "do you have a status report from the capital?" "The capital is lost," Thane replied, "but I may have found something else, something that could change everything." He activated his portable display and shared the emergency protocols with the council. The room fell silent as they read the ancient text and studied the coordinates. "Humans," Chancellor Vera said with a bitter laugh. "You want us to trust our survival to a species that abandoned us centuries ago." "Not abandoned," Thane corrected, withdrew. "There's a difference." "If they're even still alive," another council member added, "for all we know, they destroyed themselves long ago." Thane stood straighter. "Then we'll know for certain. But if there's even a chance that they're still out there, if there's even a possibility that they can help us, don't we owe it to our people to try?" The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued that they should focus on evacuation, on finding a new home far from the devourers. Others insisted that running was pointless, that the creatures would eventually find and consume them wherever they went. Finally, Chancellor Vera called for a vote. All in favor of sending an expedition to the Sol system. The vote was close, but it passed. Captain Zara Thorne, commander of the scout ship Stellar Wind, volunteered to lead the mission. She was young for a captain, but she had proven herself in dozens of dangerous missions along the rim. "How long to reach the Sol system?" Thane asked as they prepared for departure. "At maximum speed, 6 days," Captain Thorne replied, "assuming we don't run into any devourer patrols." Thane nodded. "I'm coming with you, sir." "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is," Thane said firmly. "If we find them, if they're still alive, I need to be there to speak for our people. I need to be there to ask for their help." The silent approach the journey to the Sol system was tense and quiet. The Stellar Wind was a small, fast ship designed for reconnaissance and diplomacy. Its crew of 12 worked in shifts, constantly monitoring sensors for signs of devourer activity. The creatures had been spreading rapidly, and no one knew how far their influence had reached. As they approached the outer edge of the Sol system, Captain Thorne became increasingly puzzled. "I'm not reading anything," she said, studying her displays. "No ships, no stations, no artificial signals of any kind. It's like the system is completely dead." But Thane felt something different. Call it instinct, call it hope, but something told him they were being watched. "Keep going," he said. "Take us toward the third planet. That's where they came from. The blue and green world called Earth appeared on their screens as they moved deeper into the system. It looked peaceful, almost primitive. There were no orbital stations, no ring structures, no signs of the advanced technology that humanity had possessed when they withdrew from galactic society. "Sir," the communications officer said suddenly, "I'm detecting something. It's faint, but there's a signal coming from the planet's surface." "What kind of signal?" Captain Thorne asked. "Unknown. It's not on any frequency we recognize. It's almost like it's transmitted directly into our communications array." Thane felt his heart racing. "Can you decode it?" The officer worked at his console for several minutes. It's in Old Galactic, sir. The same language as the emergency protocols." "What does it say?" "Message received. Help is coming. Prepare for contact." The revelation asterisk before anyone could respond. The space around the stellar wind began to change. What had appeared to be empty void suddenly filled with ships, not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. They appeared from nowhere, as if they had been hidden behind a veil that had just been lifted. The human ships were unlike anything in the current galactic database. They were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to bend light around them. Some were small, like fighters, while others were massive, larger than the greatest Safarian battleships. They moved without visible engines, turning and maneuvering with impossible grace. "By the ancestors," Captain Thorne whispered. "Where did they come from?" "Unknown vessel," a calm voice said over the communications system. The speaker used perfect Cephrian, despite the fact that the language had evolved significantly since human contact. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your message, Ambassador Thane. We have been waiting for your arrival." Thane's hands shook as he activated the communication system. "Admiral Chen, I am Ambassador Thane of the Zephyrian Empire. We come seeking aid under the ancient emergency protocols." "We know why you're here, Ambassador," Admiral Chen replied. "We know about the Devourers. We know about the worlds they've consumed. We know about the threat they pose to all galactic civilization. Then you'll help us." There was a pause. "Ambassador, we need to speak in person. Our ship will guide you to a docking bay. Come alone and bring whatever information you have about the Devourers." One of the human ships, a sleek vessel about the size of a frigate, approached the stellar wind. A docking tube extended from its hull, sealing against the scout ship's airlock. Thane gathered his files and data crystals, his mind racing with questions. "Sir," Captain Thorne said as he prepared to leave, "are you sure about this? We know nothing about what they've become." Thane looked at her with eyes that held both fear and hope. "Captain, our civilization is dying. If there's even a chance that they can help us, I have to take it." The new humanity, the interior of the human ship, was unlike anything Thane had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living metal that pulsed with soft light. The corridors were wide and curved, creating a sense of organic flow rather than mechanical construction. The air itself felt different, charged with energy that made his scales tingle. Admiral Sarah Chen met him in what appeared to be a conference room, though it was unlike any meeting space he had ever seen. The walls displayed images of space, but not static pictures. They showed real-time views of the galaxy, with streams of data flowing across the surfaces like living rivers of light. Chen herself was surprisingly young-looking, though Thane knew that human lifespans had been extended significantly through their medical technology. She wore a uniform that seemed to be made of the same living metal as the ship's walls, and her eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost alien. "Ambassador," she said, gesturing to a chair that molded itself to accommodate his reptilian physiology. "Welcome aboard the Harmony. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we needed to be certain you were who you claimed to be." "How did you know we were coming?" Thane asked. Chen smiled. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for 3 centuries. We know about every major conflict, every political change, every scientific discovery. We knew about the Devourers before they consumed their first world. Then why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you help before now?" "Because," Chen said, "we needed to be ready. The Devourers are not just another hostile species, Ambassador. They are something far worse. They are the antibodies of the universe itself, sent to cleanse what it perceives as a corruption." Thane stared at her. "What do you mean?" "The expansion of galactic civilization, the rapid growth of intelligent species, the consumption of resources on a galactic scale. From the universe's perspective, we are a disease. The Devourers are the cure." "That's impossible," Thane said. "Civilizations have existed for millions of years." "Yes, and periodically they've been cleansed. This is not the first time the Devourers have appeared. They come every few million years, reset the galaxy, and then retreat until the next cycle begins." Chen stood and walked to one of the living walls. Her hand touched the surface, and new images appeared. Star maps showing the rise and fall of civilizations across galactic history. Patterns that repeated with mathematical precision. "We discovered this pattern 300 years ago," she continued. "That's when we withdrew from galactic society. We knew the next cleansing was coming, and we knew we needed to prepare. Prepare how? By becoming something new, something that the universe would not perceive as a threat, something that could stand against the Devourers when they came." The images on the wall shifted, showing the transformation of humanity over the past 3 centuries. The development of technology that worked with natural forces rather than against them. The evolution of human consciousness to encompass not just individual minds, but collective awareness that spanned entire fleets. "We are no longer the humanity you remember, Ambassador. We have become something that exists in harmony with the universe itself. We are the Guardians now." The awakening storm. The fleet emerges. Admiral Sarah Chen's words hung in the air like a challenge to everything Thane thought he knew about the galaxy. He stared at the images on the living walls, trying to process the implications of what she had told him. The Devourers were not just another enemy. They were the universe's own immune system, and his people were the infection they had come to eliminate. "If that's true," he said finally, "then how can you help us? How can anyone stand against the universe itself?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "By working with it instead of against it. Ambassador, what I'm about to show you must remain between us until we're ready to reveal it to the galaxy. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Thane nodded, though he wasn't sure what he was agreeing to. Chen touched the wall again, and the images shifted to show real-time views of space around the Sol system. What Thane saw made his blood run cold. The thousands of ships he had seen earlier were just the beginning. The space around Earth was filled with vessels of every size and configuration. Some were so large they dwarfed entire space stations. Others were so small they looked like insects, but moved with purpose and intelligence. "We've been building for 3 centuries, Chen explained. "Not just ships, but a new kind of civilization. One that exists in harmony with the fundamental forces of the universe." "How many ships?" Thane asked in a whisper. "Enough," Chen replied, "but numbers aren't what matters. What matters is what we've become. She gestured to the wall, and the view shifted to show the interior of one of the massive vessels. Inside, Thane could see what looked like a city, but it was alive. Buildings that grew like plants, streets that flowed like rivers, and humans who moved with perfect coordination, as if they were all part of a single organism. We call it the collective consciousness, Chen explained. Individual minds linked together in a network of shared awareness. When one of us learns something, we all learn it. When one of us discovers a new solution, we all have access to it. We've become more than human. We've become something that can think and act on a galactic scale. And you believe this will be enough to stop the Not stop them, Chen said. Transform them. The Devourers are not evil, Ambassador. They are a tool, and like any tool, they can be repurposed if you understand how they work. The strategy Chen led Thane to the bridge of the Harmony, a space that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The crew, if they could be called that, moved with fluid grace, their actions coordinated without apparent communication. Their uniforms seemed to be extensions of their bodies, and their faces held the same otherworldly intelligence that Chen possessed. Commander Togis Chun said to a woman who appeared to be in her 30s but had eyes that seemed centuries old. Status report on the Zephyrian situation. The Devourers have consumed 67% of the Empire's worlds. Torres replied without consulting any instruments. Remaining population is approximately 2 billion, scattered across 14 refugee ships and 3 temporary settlements. At current consumption rate, complete extinction in 47 days. Thane felt his heart sink. 2 billion. There were over 50 billion Sephorians just a month ago. The Devourers are efficient, Chen said gently. But they're also predictable. They follow patterns, and patterns can be disrupted. What do you propose? Chen turned to the main display, which showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red areas indicated regions consumed by the Devourers, while blue areas showed remaining civilizations. The red was spreading like a disease, consuming everything. In its path, traditional warfare won't work, Chen explained. The Devourers adapt too quickly. They learn from every attack, every defense, every strategy. By the time you develop a new weapon, they've already developed a counter. Then how do we fight them? We don't fight them, Chen said. We redirect them. The display shifted to show the Devourers' movement patterns. They weren't random. They followed specific paths through space, consuming certain types of worlds, while avoiding others. There was a logic to their behavior, a purpose that went beyond simple destruction. They're not just consuming civilizations, Chen continued. They're consuming specific types of civilizations, ones that have developed certain technologies, certain ways of thinking. They're performing a selection process. Selection for what? For species that can evolve beyond their current limitations. The Devourers are not here to destroy all life. They're here to force evolution, to push surviving species to become something new. The gathering that took place in the sanctuary's main hall was unlike anything in galactic history. Beings who had never met before, survivors of species that had been enemies for millennia, all united by their shared experience of loss and their desperate hope for survival. Thane found himself sitting next to a crystalline being from the Lumina Collective, a species he had only heard about in ancient texts. Across from him sat a representative of the Voidwalkers, nomadic beings who lived in the spaces between stars. All around the hall, the last survivors of 100 civilizations listened as Admiral Chen explained humanity's plan. The Devourers are not our enemies, she began. They are a force of nature, like a storm or an earthquake. You cannot negotiate with a storm, but you can learn to work with it. You can build structures that bend instead of breaking. You can plant seeds that grow stronger in harsh conditions. She gestured to the walls of the hall, which displayed images of the galaxy's history, the rise and fall of civilizations, the periodic cleansings, the cycles of death and rebirth that had shaped the galaxy for millions of years. We have discovered the pattern, Chen continued. Every few million years, the Devourers appear to reset the galaxy. They consume species that have become too rigid, too dependent on technology, too separated from the natural forces of the universe. They force evolution through extinction. But evolution doesn't have to come through death. It can come through choice, through voluntary transformation, through species working together to become something greater than they were separately. The demonstration began with volunteers from each species. They were connected to the human collective consciousness through technology that seemed to be part machine, part biology, and part something else entirely. As they joined the network, their individual minds expanded to encompass the thoughts and experiences of thousands of others. Thane watched in amazement as the volunteers began to change. Not physically, but mentally. Their movements became more coordinated, their expressions more serene. They began to communicate without words, to solve problems by sharing thoughts directly, to think on scales that individual minds could never achieve. This is what we offer, Chen said. Not the replacement of individual consciousness, but its expansion. The ability to exist as both individual and collective, to think with your own mind while also sharing in the wisdom of thousands. But even as the demonstration continued, alarms began to sound throughout the sanctuary. The Devourers had found them. The new galaxy, the arrival of the Devourers at the sanctuary was both terrifying and beautiful. Their ships emerged from dimensional folds like living nightmares, all teeth and metal and hungry darkness. But instead of attacking immediately, they simply waited, as if studying what they had found. They're curious, Chen said, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had prepared for this moment for decades. They've never encountered anything like the sanctuary before, a space that exists between realities, populated by beings who have chosen to evolve. Through the sanctuary's communication systems, mathematical concepts began to flow between the human ships and the Devourer fleet. It was a conversation conducted in the language of physics and quantum mechanics, too complex for most minds to follow. But the volunteers connected to the collective consciousness could understand it. They're asking questions, one of them said, a young Zephyrian who had volunteered for the demonstration. They want to know if we're ready to take the next step. What next step? Thane asked. To become the new guardians of the galaxy. To take responsibility for guiding evolution instead of forcing it through extinction. The conversation continued for hours, with concepts flowing back and forth at the speed of thought. Gradually, the Devourers began to change. Their ships became less aggressive, their movements more graceful. They were transforming, becoming something new. They're accepting the offer, Chen said. They're willing to work with us instead of against us. But the transformation came with a price. The Devourers revealed their true nature, their connection to the fundamental forces of the universe. They showed the gathered species what it meant to exist on a cosmic scale, to think in terms of millions of years and billions of lives. We offer partnership, their message said, translated through the collective consciousness. But partnership requires commitment. You must become what you claim to be. You must prove that you can guide evolution without causing the stagnation. That requires cleansing. The choice was presented to every species represented in the sanctuary. Join the new galactic collective, undergo the transformation that would connect them to the cosmic forces that governed the universe, or continue to exist as they were under the protection of those who had chosen to evolve. Most chose transformation. The process was gradual, voluntary, and reversible. Species could join the collective consciousness for a time, experience what it meant to exist on a galactic scale, and then choose whether to make the change permanent. Thane was among the first to volunteer. As his consciousness expanded to encompass the thoughts and experiences of thousands of beings across hundreds of species, he felt a profound sense of peace. The fear that had driven him to seek help from humanity was replaced by understanding. The universe was not hostile. It was simply trying to maintain balance, to ensure that life continued to grow and evolve. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change. The Devourers became partners in the great work of guiding evolution. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in their shared connection to the cosmic forces. Wars ended not through conquest, but through understanding. The transformation was not without challenges. Some species refused to join the collective consciousness, preferring to maintain their independence. Others struggled with the concept of existing as both individual and collective. But gradually, a new form of galactic civilization emerged. It was a civilization based on cooperation rather than competition, on growth rather than consumption, on harmony with the universe rather than domination over it. The Devourers continued to exist, but their role changed from destroyers to teachers, helping species understand the cosmic forces that governed their existence. Thane, now existing as both individual, Zephyrian, and part of the galactic collective, often reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The desperate flight from dying worlds, the discovery of humanity's transformation, the choice to evolve or perish. It had been terrifying and beautiful and ultimately necessary. The galaxy had been reborn, not through destruction, but through choice. And in that rebirth, every species had found not just survival, but purpose. They had become the guardians of evolution itself, ensuring that life would continue to grow and change and reach towards something greater than it had ever been before. The universe itself seemed to approve. The cosmic forces that had once seemed hostile now felt welcoming, as if the galaxy had finally found its proper place in the greater scheme of existence. And in the depths of space, new worlds were being born, new species were evolving, and the great work of conscious evolution continued. The distress signal that had brought Thane to seek help from humanity had become something far greater. It had become the call that awakened the galaxy to its true potential. The moment when scattered species became a unified force for growth and change and hope, and in the end, that hope had been enough to shatter the old galaxy and create something new, something better, something that would endure not just for millions of years, but for as long as the universe itself existed. Asterisk.